So thank you so much for your time and turning up for what we fully believe will be a divine encounter today. All of the admirers, dancers, enthusiasts, students, and everyone else who joined us, thank you for being here. I want to make a quick announcement about the recording. This is being recorded, just so you all know, and several people have asked me about the recording. There's no immediate plans to publish it, but at the discretion of Revital and Colleena, it may be available in the future. And I just want to talk for a moment by way of introduction, how this conversation with these two amazing dancers who are going to share about their lives and experiences and successes with us came to be. So I'm a longtime student of Revital and have just met Colleena this year and started practicing and studying with Colleena. And I've done many private sessions with Revital because we tend to be on opposite sides of the globe a lot. So we do online Zooms, and oftentimes I'd ask a few questions afterwards and, you know, about theory or spirituality or what I was noticing in my body or, you know, some challenges I was having. And we would dive into these really rich and interesting conversations. You know, as everybody knows, Odissi is such a rich art form. And, you know, we just had the idea that it would be great to open this conversation and share it. And then, of course, I met, as we were planning this, I had the opportunity to study with Colleena at her summer Shakti school on Crete. And it just seemed natural that, you know, we come together and share this conversation, because I know that Revital and Colleena have a very sweet connection as well. So we're very honored to be here with these internationally acclaimed dancers. And before we launch into some questions and conversation, I just want to take a moment to invoke sacred space. We're inviting and witnessing our teachers and sisters as they share intimate details about their experiences, their lives, their challenges, and appreciate their willingness to share with us in a public forum so that we can be inspired and honor their accomplishments and success, as well as this exquisite art form. So thank you, Revital and Colleena, for being generous with your time and offering this today. And I'd like to just take a few deep breaths together and invoke sacred space. So why don't we all just feel our feet on the floor. Feel your bottom on the seat. Feel your backbone. And let's take a few deep breaths together and just really arrive here. For this purpose and with the intention to honor our teachers. And in your own body, notice any sensations, any discomforts. Make any physical adjustments necessary or as desired, so you can be very comfortable and present. Just notice any emotional energy that is present and welcome it into this space. And appreciate these sensations for their great capacity for wisdom and insight. And as we become acutely present with ourselves, we can also be sensitively present with others in this moment with our dear friends, sisters, and teachers Revital and Colleena. So fantastic. Welcome, everybody. And Revital and Colleena, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, I want to say hello. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here in this forum with all of you, especially, I mean, of course, with Colleena and Jan as my creators of this sacred circle, and all of you who joined us. And I'm excited to dive in. So welcome. And I guess I just want to say one little technical thing is that on your left bottom of your screen, there is the stop video. So if your video is playing, if you can actually stop the video and just keep it off. So Colleena, myself, and Jen can be, you know, the only ones on video. And then also, if you haven't muted yourself, there's the microphone on the very left bottom corner, and you can also make sure that it's stay muted. So, yeah.
Thank you. You want to say hello, Colleena? Oh, I think she just froze.
Oh.
I think she may have dropped off, and I'm sure she'll be back. So, oh, is she back? Not yet. Okay, well, why don't we get started, Revital, and then we will catch her up as soon as she logs back in. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think a great first question, a really interesting and juicy first question for both of you is, can you describe the moment you first fell in love with Odissi dance? And what was it about Odissi that called to your heart in such a profound way that you dropped everything, moved to India, and devoted your life to this art form?
So I suppose I will answer that question first, since Colleena is still trying to get back online. So I felt like when I searched the answer for this kind of multi-layered question, there is the first thing that sort of come in the forefront for me that really kept me engaged and kept me falling in love with this art form over and over and over, because it's not necessarily, you know, a Hollywood movie where I fell in love and lived with Odissi happily ever after kind of a thing. But it's more twists and turns for me, and, you know, turnarounds and spirals and waves. And what is really lodged so deep in my body and in my heart and in my pelvis and in my being is that beautiful dance and interwoven principles of this dance form, its tradition and its energetics and its qualities of practice that bring the sensual and the spiritual into a beautiful interwoven expression. And that is at the core of what keeps me coming back into the dance floor and into the altar and into the practice. So that is really the core for me of the answer for this question. But in terms of, you know, the moment when I fell in love with it, I was already in India. I came to India really in the quest of a spiritual experience, or the spiritual longing is really what propelled me to travel to India and to take on different practices. And I practiced yoga and meditation. And I started, I came across classical Indian dance, but it wasn't Odissi initially. It was Bharatanatyam in the deep south. And then I ended up in Varanasi, and studied Kathak for about a year. But somehow those dance forms didn't really stick. And I mean, I did fall in love, but it, you know, it was just a fling. It wasn't like a lifelong love story. And then when I went to Odissi, which was sort of circumstances, I had some friends who lived there and invited me to a healing retreat, and we all came together, and she took me to see a performance of Bodhisi dance at Tragorajpur, which is the birthplace of Guru Kelucharan Mahapatra. And it's an ancient village in Orissa, not too far from Puri. And it has this very old, I don't know how old, but it's an ancient temple of the goddess of Devi. And it's all, you know, wooden temple behind and a wooden stage. And it's stand there rather lonely in the middle of that village. And it's an artist village. Everybody in this village are artists. And it was some kind of a full moon celebration, and the offering for the goddess was Odissi dance on that stage, right in front of that temple. And somehow that moment in time, you know, the astrology and the geography and the moment of time in my life, that it all came together. It felt like it's instantly lodged into my body. It was this deep recognition of the movement, of the form, of the music, of the sentiment. It truly felt divine and mesmerizing beyond belief. It almost felt like I'm leaping out of my body to be there on stage with his dancers. And that was the beginning for me. I mean, long story short, that was the beginning for me. I was like, this is it. This is what I want to learn. There was no doubt in my heart that I have to experience this. And
so it was like a love at first sight.
Yeah, and as I say, there were a lot of twists and turns, and I fell off, you know, the practice and came back to it and all of that. But that is my first moment, and as I said, the big allure is that beautiful dance between the sensual and the spiritual coming together in this art form for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we're waiting for Colleena to log back on, I hope she gets back on
She's
easily.
on.
She's on. Okay, let me find her. I just have to pin her again.
Jen, I do think you need to pin the three of us, because if anyone else unmutes, then they come up as
Well, Revital is pinned, and you were pinned before you went off, so I will pin you again. All right, there you go.
Oh, thank you. Sunaz is mentioning it has to be Spotlight. I'm using the wrong link.
Spotlight?
It should be on the three dots on the top right corner. Should give you the option to Spotlight.
Like for everyone.
Thank you, Sunaz.
And that's going to remove everybody else, which I don't want to do, but then I'll try because I don't want to remove Revital.
I think you need to, I was saying pin, but what I meant was spotlight. You have to spotlight me, you, and Revital. That's it.
There's another.
I wanted to say that before I lost connection.
Okay, so you're back. All right, we kind of got started. And maybe you heard some of that, Colleena. And I just want to say to people as well, if you want to put some questions in the chat, you're welcome to do that. And as there's time, we'll check in on that and see if we can offer some questions to Revital and Colleena. So what we were kind of riffing about while you were gone, Colleena, is, you know, what was your first point of Wow, Odissi, like this is it for me. You know, what was that moment that you fell in love and fell in love so much that you decided, you know, I'm going to change my whole life and move to India, and here we go. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Thank you. Yeah, I got to hear Revital speaking, and I just want to say, like, to kind of introduce my gratitude to be here. I just love listening to Revital's story because I just felt like I went into this story, you know, like journeying to Orissa. I just felt like I was at the end of the planet, so far from home, and having this profound experience through my years there. And then I just love to hear Revital's story because we went through such a similar experience. So I appreciate everything you said, Revital. And usually whenever we talk, we're like, yeah, me too. we really share the same feelings. So I second everything that she said. But the moment that I saw Odissi, I didn't know what it was that struck me. Not at that moment. I think spiritually, emotionally, I wasn't mature enough to understand what was working. But isn't that kind of like all the subtle arts, like, you know, even body work or spiritual work, you kind of think it's happening on one layer, but then at the same time, there's 100 layers at work underneath the surface. So I remember I saw Odissi. I was I was learning belly dance, and I just became obsessed with Middle Eastern music and culture, and the idea of embodying another cultural view, particularly of my own feminine body, of embodying another femininity besides recently in a university program I'm doing right now, we had to introduce how we learned about our body, and just we had to bring an image to class, and the image that I brought was an image of Baywatch. I grew up in the 90s in California, so that's kind of like this body as I was going through puberty and becoming a woman. That's like the body that was presented to me. And then I remember when I found belly dance, there was this whole other idea of my feminine body. And then when I saw Odissi, I was in university, and I literally found a book in the library with a picture of Madhavi Mudgal. And I was just, it just blew my mind, the idea of this femininity is possible. I didn't even, she was in a tripangi position, this very languid, feminine, voluptuous position, and yet such a control and restraint and refinement and grace and a power, but also a surrender. So all these qualities that I just had not encountered in my where I grew up, and the culture and the time and the place and the position that I grew up in. So I was struck by the aesthetic of Odissi, but then as I, you know, years later, I look back and I realize the thing that struck me was the potential that the physical could lead us to ultimate spiritual transcendence. I mean, that the body, using the body in a fun and beautiful and celebratory way, such as dance and music. I mean, it's fun and it's beautiful at its most basic level, but then there's so many layers inside of it that initially the attraction was the aesthetic of it, but then over the years it's like, oh wow, this is toning my my self-esteem, the vision of my body. This is toning spiritual potential as I embody these different archetypes, and I embody different this very pious version of femininity, which is not something we often encounter these days. That's a striking thing about Odissi, is the piety that is presented and also the sensuality as being, it's a divine feminine, and you know, these looking at femininity and the body as even that sexuality or sensuality that is within our dancing body, that is divine and a path. So there's a lot in there that, I mean, the initial contact, and then really the question is why did you stay with Odissi? You know, it's like that love at first sight, but then the relationship's been going on for so long, for both of us. I think we keep falling in love again and again, and then you find more layers and more depths, and just continuously falling in love and following the mystery, because the more we learn about such a complex art form as Odissi, you start learning about the mythology and the archetypes that we're embodying, and then you can follow that path. And then the music, the complexity of the music, and then we follow that, and the idea of this transcendent body, and we follow the connections with yoga. So yeah. For that.
All that, yeah, amazing. It's really rich. And I can say, just as a person that came, and I'm sure everybody has a story, you know, that moment when they were first captivated. When I first kind of randomly attended a class with Revital, I had never seen Odissi before. It was at once this like shocking experience for my body, like, wow, what just happened? And I actually remember, you know, it came much later in life, even being in pain for a while, because it was just such a different way of moving. But at the same time, like, where have you been all of my life? And of course, that had a lot to do with Revital's transmission as well. So I can totally resonate with everything that you're both sharing about the wealth that this magical art form has to share. So I'd love to ask also, you know, in studying, you've both spent a whole lot of time in India, living and studying in India. What has that been like for you? How has that affected your life? And what's it like to spend so much time there for those of us that have maybe just visited or maybe never visited India?
Colleena, do you want to go first this time?
Okay. Okay. What is it like to kind of arrive in India to study classical dance? I think when both of us arrived, it was just, you know, things have changed so much, but my experience was there just were not many foreigners. I mean, you heard the legends of a few foreigners before, and there's a few examples of foreign students who had come to study Odissi over the last several decades, but it was a very foreign experience. I mean, arriving, I personally didn't really have any context of what it is like to live in India, and it's a matter of learning to dress differently, to speak differently, to eat different food, to behave. The idea of being a young woman is very different. Personal space, you know, personal freedoms and things that things we might value, you know, in different places of the world. It's just such a different culture. So it was extremely difficult in the beginning, because for me, not many people spoke English in my context. My teacher didn't really speak English, and I was training with young teenage boys, Odia boys. And so for those of you who don't know Odissi so much, Odissi is connected to a tradition where young boys train in an acrobatic form of Odissi, which is known as Gotipoa dance. And the training is very, I guess you could imagine it like a like a circus arts training, or it's very intense training, and a young boy's body is very different than my my body. So the thing that was so obvious was that this big white body that I am in a classroom of very different bodies, and that was shocking for so many people. Not so many people in the neighborhood where I was living had ever seen a white person in real life in front of them, let alone a tall white person, you know. And so it was like literally just going out of my house to walk to the school. You know, people would walk, you know, come across me in the road, and like this kind of response day after day after day. And so it's something very much about the body, because we didn't speak the same language, so they couldn't say, wow, you're from California, or what, you know. It wasn't my story that was shocking, it was my body. So I just remember feeling so uncomfortable in my body because of that, and because of the rigorous training. Something like that really got me is I had never really broken a sweat before in my life before going to Orissa, which is a very hot tropical climate, to train in an extraordinarily difficult dance. And I remember that feeling of like sweating for the first, I mean, not just sweating, like wringing my clothes out with sweat, mopping the floor after I was dancing because I sweat puddles. And it's extremely uncomfortable. And when I think back to that time, it's just like how I felt in my body was so awkward and so painful and so bizarre. And then here I am trying to embody this graceful divine dance. It just didn't feel how it looks when you see it on the stage. It's so pretty, costume is so pretty, everything is in its place, and you just feel like, you know, sweaty and tired and painful. So that's been my life pretty much. And so now I definitely realized at some point in my life, if I'm just uncomfortable, I'm growing. So as long as I'm uncomfortable, I seem to be doing the right thing. And those years of just being so uncomfortable, like culturally uncomfortable, in my body, just pushing and pushing and pushing, those are the years that really made me dig deep and find an inner strength to kind of to keep going. It was really just so indescribably uncomfortable, and I just had to find this inner fire, and in the beginning it wasn't the spiritual, you know, I wasn't going to India. I didn't go to India to have a spiritual experience. I just, you know, I went because there was something calling me, and so it wasn't quite clear to me what was calling me. And now the transformation is hopefully underway, and so I can reflect on that spirit was beckoning me through a very uncomfortable training period, which, you know, I'm still engaged in the training. I hope I never end that training, because it's transformative, but definitely the beginning years were very uncomfortable.
It's amazing that you stayed through all of that. You were young, and, you know, somehow some part of you knew through all of that discomfort, you stayed. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So beautiful. I definitely can relate to a lot of it. And you know, the whole training with the Gopis with a young boys was really also my beginning with Odissi was in a Gurukul, a Gopipur Gurukul, and being a big white woman, you know, with all those young, I mean, they were pre-teens for sure. They were like, well, anything between like 6 to 16. So they were really young boys, and we were like right there with them. I was actually the only one for a while, right there with them, you know, doing all the choker steps and the tribangis and exercise and all of that. It was definitely, so I actually arrived in Odissi after I have been living in India for years on and off. So when I first came to India, I pretty quickly, well, when I first came to India, I felt, well, first you get that sensual assault. I mean, it's such a sensual place. I mean, the amount of scents that are in the air at any given moment, it's impossible to integrate. And the explosion of flavors, you know, every time you put something in your mouth, it's either way too spicy or way too sweet, and or way too sour or something. It's way too something. It's just like the experience of too much. It's so quintessential India. It's too much colors, and it's too much, you know, smells, and it's too much noise, and it's too crowded, and it's just too much. And that feeling, in one hand, felt, you know, too much, but on the other hand, it felt like it still does. Every time I come to India, there's this feeling of like Mother India is embracing me, like the fabric of life is so tightly woven that I feel like the air is so thick, you know, it's so humid, that I feel like it's hugging me with all of this sensual explosion. And then I, you know, rode those waves and became a pretty wild yogini kind of woman, you know, like have a lot of experience living in caves and with sadhus, and really going into the wilderness and into nature. And so a few years later, when I did end up in Odisha for the first time, actually initially was in nature for a few weeks, and then I was getting ready to take on the practice of Odissi. And for me, that was a moment of entering into what I felt like was real India, like really living within the context of sort of everyday people's culture in a village. But still, there was a lot of religion that was around. There was a lot of rules and, you know, ways of being, ways of eating, and ways of sleeping, and ways of going to the bathroom that you had to follow. You know, you have to follow the rules. I had to dress properly. All of a sudden, I had to put my bangles and my bindi and my earrings and my necklace and my sindu and my, you know, the whole thing. I had to be a lady all of a sudden because, you know, I was part of the family. I had to represent. And that was a big deal for me. And it was, in a way, initiation also into what does it mean to be an Indian woman? Because, you know, my family didn't want me to go alone to the market. And I was like, what do you mean? I've always gone alone to the market. And I had to sort of keep my ego, my identification with myself as an independent woman somewhat aside. So not that I was going to be letting anybody control me, God forbid, or goddess forbid, but still I had to play the game. And I found that by playing the game and by submitting my, strong will to something greater than me, that kind of act of surrendering, act of letting go of something that was so familiar and dear to me, which was my independence, just kind of putting it aside for a moment, was opening such a big treasure chest of gems, of experiences, because my respect to my family, to my teacher, to my teacher's tribe, to my teacher's larger family, was opening so many doors to me. While I was able to really drop in and become one of them, they recognize my sincerity and my dedication, and were able to give me so much more of the depth of what is behind the dance, of the deeper practices, and really being part of that kind of inner sanctum of their life. And this is, to me, where I could really understand, sort of have a window into the lineage and into their ancestors and into the unspoken teaching, the teaching that perhaps they themselves were not aware of, that were just coming through them, because of who they are, because of the environments that they have been living and practicing and growing in. And that was very profound and precious, and it was worth all the sweating. But one funny thing is that, the people that I've danced with in Odissi always come to me and say, "You're so tall, you're so beautiful." And I think, I'm so tall, I'm so ugly, I'm a giant, and they think that's just so gorgeous, but it's so hard to sit in choka when you're so tall. So I have made it a point to always tell my teacher, tell my students, you are perfect. You are perfect, we are short and tiny, you're perfect. You are tall and heavy, you're perfect. Whatever shape you are, you're in the perfect shape to practice this form, because this form, this art form, will shape you no matter what. So
and sit down and choka. Sit down and choka.
Sit down.
And Colleena does that too. Yes, beautiful. Wow, so rich. And was there more, Revital, or do you feel complete with that question?
No, I feel complete.
Yeah, that was really great. Thank you. And from these beginnings, you both have 20 some odd years on, you've both become world-class dancers. You've performed in India, you've performed around the world. I mean, these worldly experiences, how have they shaped you as a woman? And how have they shaped your worldview?
You want to go first?
Sure. I would like to relate to it as a dynamic present time activity. It still is. I still find myself being shaped, and my views are always being shaped, and my identity as a woman is also something that is continuously being shaped. And I find that there is something that Colleena actually said in response to the first question about that beautiful control, restraint in the form of Odissi that allows the femininity, the sensuality, and even the sexuality to be revealed in a very divine kind of light or context. And that principle of control in this dance form has really allowed me to feel more free to express myself in a way that is feeling safe. I feel safe to be a woman, and I feel respected and supported by the dance form. There's something about practicing Odissi that is both accentuating my femininity and curbs it at the same time, or keep it intact and I mean, maybe the word controlled sounds a little bit has too much of an edge to it, sounds a little too strong. But nevertheless, I think that we all need to have, we need to have a vessel to hold the precious nectar. We can't just spill all over the place. And I think that I was a little bit more spilling all over the place when I was young. And there's something about finding Odissi, something that, strength and developing the fluidity that was that still is. Every time I practice, it's like, oh, it's like I can take a big breath and I can really be beautiful because I feel safe to be beautiful. It's really what comes to me, and I also feel very empowered by practicing dance. I feel empowered to inhabit my form as a woman and to express my views, to express myself. And in fact, I feel the power of expressing myself without words, expressing myself with a glance, expressing myself with my body in a way that is very sophisticated. It's nothing short of nuanced and complex and sophisticated. And yet it's physical, and it's where I feel in my element. I've actually never saw myself as someone who can stand in front of an audience of people and share something of value. I see myself as a very shy person, but I think that through the dance, I've felt very empowered to stand in front of a classroom. And if I'm going to teach a dance class, it's like I'm on top of the mountain. I'm in my element. I'm happy, and I have a lot to share all of a sudden, But if you take me out of the classroom, I don't know who am I who am I to say to teach anything, or to share anything. I know nothing, kind of a thing. So I think that there is something about, and it's the same on the stage. If you put me on a stage, I feel empowered to share my art because I feel like I'm on a mission. I feel like I'm on my path, and I feel like the path is there. The journey is begging to happen, and I have no choice, I guess. I mean, really, when it comes to entering the stage, we have no choice. The music is there and the audience is there, and we must take a position in the cosmic play. And that is a powerful kind of constellation to install ourselves in. And I swear, I told myself, I mean, for the first 100 performances that I have done, if not more, I've told myself over and over, like the second before I go to the stage, don't ever do that to yourself again. That is a nightmare. Why am I here? And then as soon as I enter the stage and start dancing, I'm like, everything is falling into place. And I remember, why am I doing it? Because I feel that bliss. I mean, I feel the ecstasy. And I feel the ecstasy of having this body, you know, that femininity that is expressing itself through my body. And so I'd say that this dance form is helped me and still helping me immensely to feel that connection to my divine feminine and also my divine masculine, but that's for another question, I guess.
And that would be a good question to explore. Such a beautiful, eloquent answer. Thank you. Yeah, let's hear what Colleena has to share.
Oh, such good conversation. Well, I kind of want to jump in where I was really connecting to what you were saying, Revital, about like the restraint, how ironic and how paradoxical that we're talking about it's like restraint and expansion of specifically femininity, which is so unique. I mean, it came to both of us, I think, through the lens of Odissi, is this idea, like we started talking about our transition from whatever our upbringing was to being a proper Odia girl in India, with, you know, having to dress properly, asking for permission and someone to accompany us to the market. And like suddenly what initially for me felt like restriction and restraint and classical dance, it's not just Odissi, but I think all classical dances kind of thrive on restraint, because I feel like as a teacher, what I'm often doing is shaving away, like carving away the superfluous or the excess, and just refining the movement. And so the movement, finally the movement scope gets so small. And it reminds me of Guru Kelucharan Mohapatra, who is one of the, we kind of refer to him as one of the founding gurus of Odissi, reestablishing Odissi in recent times as a classical dance form. And also Kelucharan Mohapatra is the style or the lineage in which both of us study. So this great guru has done incredible compositions of the Gita Govind, and some very specific scenes, like in a scene, one of my favorite scenes of the Gopi Vastrahara is when Lord Krishna steals the sarees of the gopis while they're bathing in the Yamuna River. And so there's like this scene, which I remember learning, that the gopis, this gopi taking off her clothes at the river to get naked and jump in the water. And Guru Kelucharan Mohapatra, a man, composed this choreography, and the way that we take off the blouse and get naked on stage, it like blew my mind. As I was learning this, I was in a sari in front of my teacher, behaving very properly, and what we kind of imagine as like, you know, a very controlled environment of femininity and, you know, proper environment. And then we're acting out taking our clothes off, and a man choreographed this, and it could be so vulgar. It could, to dance this on stage and so many of the episodes in the Gita Govind, it's lovemaking, it's taking off clothes, it could be portrayed so vulgar if it were done without care. It's like talking about a difficult topic. You have to take such care in how you present each word so it's not misunderstood. And the idea that is trying to be extracted from this poetry of Gita Govind, which is so often presented in Odissi, is the spiritual analogy, the analogy of Krishna being the divine and the gopis or Radha being the devotee, and the union of the devotee with the beloved. So this is the essence of the poetry that we're trying to extract, but the scenes are often quite, quite delicate to perform on a stage. And considering that Odissi is presented in a society which really controls femininity, like women, dressing, covering the body and behaving with restraint in a public space, and kind of controlling that's like sexuality and femininity. So I just think it's this an incredible paradox that we dance in, of such explicit content in our dances, and yet presented with such care and control that we can talk about the most sensual experiences on a stage in public. I don't often see like contemporary dance, for example, or even belly dance, which I do, and we consider it, a lot of people consider it a very sensuous dance, but there's a certain limit that most dancers won't. We're not going to act out making love on stage, and yet in a very traditional, very refined, very controlled classical dance of India, where we're acting out these scenes, but because of that care and control surrounding it, the way the costume is, the way femininity is presented, but always with an air of restraint, that we're able to talk about such explicit subjects and present it, I just think that's amazing. That's one of the unique things in Odissi. Yeah, I guess I'll I'll close it there because I see the time, and I would also love to hear some questions from some of our participants today, because I think one question leads to the next, and the topics start to unravel. Jennifer, you're muted.
We have one that I think ties into this principle of restraint that I think could be really interesting to explore. So Isabel asked, what do you think is special about Odissi versus other dances such as belly dance that make it for you a unique art form to experience and practice?
That's a great question. I feel like I was just speaking about one of, there's so many special things about Odissi. Of course, we're Odissi lovers, devotees, but I think what I just mentioned of a very measured, precise degree of restraint in the dance. And also I think Revital was starting to go down that path, but it's a big path, the Shiva Shakti, the masculine feminine, that is balanced in Odissi, because what we often see visually when we watch Odissi is how graceful and languid it is, but when doing it, you really mostly what you're experiencing is that heavy, grounded, like the slapping of the feet and the effort required for the really the athleticism in the dance. But Revital, you want to share a few thoughts?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think there's a few things. I mean, definitely the classical Indian dance forms all share this kind of intricacy of really, well, the classical dance is also classical music. I mean, they are interwoven and they work together and they feed off each other. And the rhythm is very intricate, it's very complex, and the music is, and then there's the dance technique, and then there is, of course, the material, you know, the mythology, the context, and the culture, the storytelling aspect of it all. And then there is the yoga behind it, you know, the energetic sort of technology of dislodging the kundalini Shakti from the pelvis, that, you know, open hips, the vibration that we resonate in our body from the stamping of the feet in the rhythmical pattern. So that's sort of connect us with the concept of rhythm, which is the context of our cosmos. You know, everything is moving in rhythm, and when we tune into rhythm, we tune into that movement of cosmic elements. And so there is this kind of cosmic feeling, an earth grounded feeling, and vibration in the body, and the open hips, and the movement of the rib cage that is sort of seducing the energy from the pelvis to come into the heart and sort of mature here and, you know, express through their creative channels. And of course, there is the nuanced, subtle, and precise way of expressing through hand mudras, especially when you come to this kind of delicate topics such as, you know, lovemaking and things like that. And of course, there is the whole details of the face, of how you move your eyebrows and your eyes, and, you know, how you move your cheeks, and how you sort of move everything in such a, as Colleena said, very, very subtle and precise, and almost, you know, such a small scope of movement that expresses such depth and such nuance. So I think all of that, you know, I'm just kind of going through all of this really quickly, but what I'm trying to say is that that is unique to classical Indian dance, for sure, on that level of intricacy. And Odissi has, I mean, that ribcage movement is very unique for Odissi. That movement of, you know, agitating the whole chamber of the heart, and it brings in another layer of sensuality and this language, this tribangi, you know, that kind of movement that bring more that serpentine form and flow in the body is very unique for Odissi in that sense. Of course, it's a very big part of belly dance. I'm not really the one to speak for belly dance because I'm not a belly dancer. You know, definitely not a professional belly dancer, anyways. And you know, yeah, I haven't studied it really, so I can't speak for it. But I think that yeah, well, that's all I have to say, I guess, in terms of what's unique about Odissi. Of course, there's more to say, but just a few things.
Yeah, there will always be so much more to say, but those were really interesting answers. Thank you so much. And in the interest of time, I'm going to offer one more question that Janice posted. Janice said, one could say that both yoga and Odissi were for the body of young boys. It never took into account the physical or physiological body of women in terms of training. In a time of reimagining, how might one reconstruct the practice of Odissi to support women, female-bodied, without losing the essence of the tradition? That's kind of a doozy for, you know, to close with, but I think it's interesting.
Thank you, Janice.
Yeah, do you want to start, Colleena?
I feel like I need to tiptoe towards that question because yeah, it could be an hour in itself, but thank you for that thoughtful question. I don't know if I completely agree that Odissi and yoga was built for the young boy's body, but I completely understand where that idea would come from. Certainly that's been the highlight, like the highlighted perspective, but I just I don't know. I feel like Odissi was made for maybe not my body. You know, you look at like a young audio bodies, and maybe it was made for a young, flexible female body. But I do feel it's very conducive to the female body. I think the strength in the the physical aspect of the dance, the strength of the legs, and the balancing of masculine and feminine energies. I think it's very complementary to actually how a woman is constructed, both energetically and physically. In the training process, in my personal experience, like if you're training for the stage, if you're training for kind of your highest capacity of performance, that training isn't very conducive to taking rest when you're menstruating and taking time when you're so those are like some of the practical aspects of training that I have faced as a woman, that I have been like compromises that I've made in my female body as a professional dancer going to the stage. But Odissi kind of originally comes from a context of offering, and it wasn't as our pieced together Odissi history goes. Odissi comes from a temple dance tradition, and when the dance was done in a more ritualistic offering sense, and also in the courts, Indian dance was also performed in royal courts. I think that allowed for example, just one aspect of the practicalities of being a dancer, like during menstruation, taking that time off of dance. But when you have the demands of going to the stage, I think it's not the structure of Odissi, but I think it's the demands of the stage that is like, in my own experience, if I have a performance and I'm menstruating, I'm sorry. It's like what to do. I just say to my body, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to perform today at your highest capacity, and not take that time to kind of fall into a softer space. But that's not Odissi. That's the demand of the stage, of performance, and of a profession. It's my professional attitude that I give my best, no matter if I have a headache or cramps or whatever. And yoga, as I learn it from my master, it's very acknowledging of the female physiology, and there's certain things that we do and we don't do at certain times of our cycles of life. So I think maybe that got glossed over and forgotten sometimes how yoga is presented. But again, I think maybe that's when yoga is presented in more of a performative way, as it is in the modern context. But there's a lot to say. I'm not giving any final answers, just a few thoughts to throw out there. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, Revital.
Yeah, I mean, I feel so. I definitely second you, Colleena, that I want to just clarify that yoga and dance were not created to just young male bodies by any stretch of imagination, but definitely there has been popularity of young men becoming sort of the prominent gurus of Odissi dance and of yoga, and that's kind of propagated more of this maybe anti-feminine kind of practices. So it's just basically a lack of understanding, some level of ignorance perhaps in how to work with women and what female bodies are all about. So I understand the sentiments this question of is coming from, but I don't necessarily feel, Odissi is a classical Indian dance form that was reconstructed in the 1950s based on Gotipua, which was an art form for boys, and Maharis, which was exclusively women, female dancers, and some other kind of folk arts and a lot of scriptures and sculpture art that was informing and inspiring the reconstruction of Odissi dance, and just a lot of kind of indigenous art forms actually that fed into this new structure. But when one thing that I'm very passionate about is to adjust and to adapt Odissi dance training to the needs of the students who are having the means and interest to arrive in the classroom. And for me, in my years of teaching, most of my students have been female for sure. And most of them were, I'd say, more mature women, not necessarily young women, not children and not teenagers, maybe somewhere in their 20s, but vast majority of my students have been older women, 30s, 40s, 50s. I've always welcomed women and men too, but people of every age and every physical ability into my classroom, because I find it, because I'm so passionate about this art form, and I welcome the challenge of trying to find how we can sort of find a meeting place between what they can do and what I can offer or what this art form can offer. And absolutely, I do think there is some kind of, we need to make some kind of a distinction of whether you are practicing to be a performance artist in Odissi, or if you are studying Odissi for your self growth and empowerment and development. And maybe what you learn out of the practice is going to transform you in some way, that some other kind of art form will come out of you, or some other kind of expression will come out of you that is not necessarily going to be Odissi. So you can say, I'm inspired by Odissi dance, I'm a lifelong student of Odissi, but I'm not in a space or a place in my life where I am going to perform the pure classical art form, but I'm going to utilize elements in it in my devotional practice or in my creative expression. And so if we have that attitude, there is so much that can be done, and absolutely we can keep the integrity of the dance form intact, and also modify a lot of the practices to fit the bodies and attitudes that come our way. So, yeah.
I love that answer. I love both of your answers. And I can attest to the fact that you're really generous in that way. And, that the art form does have just so much to offer for personal growth and, to learn about the world and a different culture and our bodies and feminine and masculine. So I really appreciate how both of you make that accessible, and the transmission you bring in your own unique ways. So really, really rich questions and very, very interesting answers. It just whets my appetite for more. But for today, we're going to come to a close. I wonder if either of you have some closing remarks you'd like to make.
For me, I want to say I'm so happy that we have 2 more sessions.
Me too.
Because I find it very enriching, and I enjoy very much the company and the platform. So I'm looking forward to seeing you next week.
Absolutely, I feel the same way. These are important and enriching and yeah, beautiful conversations that I think we all love this dance. I mean, many of us are, I think, here because we are attracted to this art form because it gives us so much beyond just the physical practice. There's so much to discuss and to discover about ourselves through discussing it. So thank you for creating this space to have these conversations, and thanks to everyone for joining us. This is really beautiful. I hope to hear more questions, and I'm just, yeah, I'm really curious where all of these conversations and threads are going to lead us.
Yeah. Bravo. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your insights. I just want to tell everybody that we have 2 more sessions scheduled. Next week, we're going to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of Odissi, unique elements of Odissi and the art of adornment. That's one of my favorite things about Odissi, although I have a lot of favorite things about Odissi. And then the following week, we're going to dive into culture, history, and the contemporary Odissi dancer. So I just want to say once again, because somebody again asked about the recording. Recordings may be available sometime in the future. We don't intend to make them available immediately right after these sessions. So please do try and attend live, and maybe at the discretion of Revital and Colleena, they will be available at some point. But at this time, we don't know. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Colleena and Revital. I really appreciate this beautiful space and this amazing art form, and everybody that cares about it and loves it as much as we do. Until next time, namaste and karataka, everybody. And if anybody wants to unmute themselves to say goodbye or hello, please feel free to do so before you go. We've got lots of comments, lots of gratitude, lots of love coming in the comments right now. So nourishing. It was a pleasure. Beautiful. I'm grateful. It was so enriching. Thank you so much. So grateful and overwhelmed with joy to see the convergence of these 2 beautiful teachers. Yes, me too. Thank you. Love you. Thank you so much. Namaste. Deep bows. Lots and lots of love still coming.